All right, joining us now is terrorism expert and author Jeffrey Simon. Thanks so much for being with us this morning. I want to start with the ISIS flag. Investigators say the attacker had an ISIS flag. Are we seeing a resurgence of ISIS given what's happening now in Syria and in the broader Middle East?
Well, ISIS has always had a presence, and it's really more now of almost the name brand, where it's not when we talk about Jabbar joined ISIS, it's not like he was recruited or he was in communication with ISIS leaders in Syria or Iraq or wherever it might be. It simply means that we have almost the classic type of a lone wolf. I know there have been reports there are others involved. We don't know yet what that involvement is. But Jabbar had personal problems, and a lot of lone wolves have these personal grievances, and then they latch onto an ideology or a cause to justify their violent behavior. And Jabbar apparently made a series of recordings as he was driving from Texas to New Orleans, where he was complaining about his personal life, divorce. He planned to kill his family, but instead had dreams about ISIS and then decided then to pledge his allegiance to ISIS. So ISIS, although not as strong as it was back 10, 15 years ago when it had all that territory and land in Iraq and Syria, is still a threat, but more in terms of their online presence around the world.
So that's what you're saying is, we know he served in Iraq and Afghanistan, so he likely wasn't radicalized there. But this is maybe an online thing that he just kind of got into to justify his behavior?
Yeah, I think probably there was online where he was following perhaps maybe postings by ISIS or social media. Obviously, he was aware of ISIS, and then it combined with the personal problems. And this is just really something that is really going to be looked at in terms of the investigation. When exactly did he become radicalized? Again, whatever radicalization means, does it mean that he then decided he's going to, commit to this violent group? But when did he become radicalized, and when did he decide to actually commit a violent attack and not just post things on social media?
You study terrorism, you watch these things closely. Are you concerned about domestic terrorism in the United States? Do you think it's on the rise here? And how do you think the incoming administration might handle that type of terror attack?
Well, the thing about domestic terrorism, it cuts across the political and religious spectrum. We've had attacks in recent years from both the far right. We've had the single issue attack by Mangione in New York, where he had the gripes with the healthcare industry and what he called corporate greed. And there really is not any kind of left, right, or center that has the monopoly on the domestic terrorism. And we both have just lone wolves and the organized group. So it is on the rise, and it's going to be a very difficult threat to deal with because terrorists, whether they be lone wolves or organized groups, can strike basically anywhere at any time, and it's really impossible to have security everywhere all the time unless you're going to create a Fortress America, which nobody wants.
Well, that's my husband and I were actually out to dinner last night. It was a very busy restaurant, crowded, and my husband looked at me and said, I know where the 3 exits are. I think it's something that when these types of things happen, it's a reminder of being aware of your surroundings. But should people right now be avoiding crowds and big events? We have so many things coming up, like the Super Bowl is going to be in New Orleans. What advice would you give to people?
See, that's really what the terrorists want. And it's really interesting when you think about, ramming a car into a crowd wasn't that difficult of the operation. Look at all the repercussions that it's had. It's created this fear and concern around the country. And it's good to be aware of your surroundings. But terrorists want to create panic and fear in our lives. And that's something we can't allow that to, occur. So people should, enjoy their life, go to crowds, but be aware of surroundings, unattended backpacks or suspicious vehicles or whatever it might be. But you just can't really just, hunker down and live in isolation.
All right. Well, Jeffrey Simon, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, we're joined now by Doug Coons. He is a former FBI special agent and founder of Veracity, which is an investigative firm. Thanks for being with us. First, we'd just like to know what you would be looking into right now, given what we know so far about the attacker, his time in the military, and his statements on social media.
I think right now, in light of what is already known, I would be focusing on his communications. Who was he talking to in the hours and days prior to the incident? What were they talking about? Getting into phones is sometimes difficult, but it can be a wealth of information. Looking at the internet and what kind of websites was he visiting, social media, um, also looking for things in common with the Las Vegas explosion and seeing if those two individuals were communicating with anyone in common. So those are the things that I would be looking for right now.
You know, it's one of those things that at the surface, it looks like he was potentially acting alone. He had all these problems, as you're talking about, in his personal life and those types of things. But why is the FBI thinking that he wasn't acting alone?
Hard to say, but even if he was acting alone in the act itself, it's probable that he had some sort of support network, maybe financially or inspirationally or some other means that inspired him to do this or helped him with the improvised explosive devices. They'll be looking at those. Typically, they have a signature to them. The way that they're built, the components that they use are often common amongst certain groups. So if this is the way we've seen ISIS make IEDs before, and he's got a similar setup, that's another clue that this was actually sponsored, encouraged by someone from the actual ISIS organization versus him just being a supporter sympathizer.
Well, we also know he served in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? Is it possible that he learned about it there, or that he had dealings maybe with ISIS members while serving in Iraq?
It's possible. I'm sure the Bureau will be working with the military to find out, exactly what his role was, where he was, and when. Did he interact with any ISIS prisoners that were taken? It's possible that somebody got his ear and started making him think in a different way than he was used to, because this seems out of character for him for the first half of his life. When exactly did he change his beliefs? And maybe his family or close friends kind of know when these changes made. I have to believe that somebody saw something and knew something was amiss leading up to this. That might not be true, but he seemed to have a lot of personal problems, according to what I have seen, with, like you said, the finances, marriage problems, those kind of things. So I feel like somebody probably knew that there was a shift in his personality, and we'll find that out in the next few days or weeks.
Can you remind people how ISIS formed and how it's evolved?
It's been a while since I've thought about these things. I think pursuant to the Gulf Wars, it developed as a consequence of that, and grew a following that kind of snowballed, and hadn't heard a lot about it over the past few years, but seems to have been making a resurgence. Typically violent extremist ideology, and I think another one of the fears is that with the vacuum now in Syria, with the regime being taken out, that ISIS might step in to try to fill that gap. So hopefully this is not a sign of other things to come.
All right, Doug Coons, thank you so much for joining us, and we do hope to learn more in the coming hour or so with this press conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to bring back in Doug Coons, the former FBI special agent, and first just get your reaction to the authorities there saying that they do believe he acted alone. There is, of course, a simultaneous investigation going on in Las Vegas with the explosion of the Cybertruck there, and both of these attackers served in the military. One was currently serving, the one in Las Vegas, and of course the attacker in New Orleans was a veteran who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. What do you make of the information that we just learned?
Cleared a lot of things up. I think I said before, I was surprised that the Bureau came out with the strong comment about they believe he acted with others. Even if they believe that, in my day, that most likely would not have gone out at that time until totally for sure. But the governor, I think, hit the nail on the head, is that in this day and age, when there's such a call for transparency, you provide the information that you have at that time. And at the time, that's what they felt was accurate. And it's very fluid. These things change over time. And also, like he said, it could change again as they dig deeper into this investigation. They may find out again that he was not actually acting alone. So the public has to understand these things are not static, and it may change over time. But that's the best information they have right now.
Do you think it goes back to the IEDs? You know, at first they thought that there were several. Now they've confirmed that he just placed 2. There were reports that potentially other people had been seen placing IEDs. It seems we're able to clear that up with surveillance video and that type of thing.
Yeah, that also makes sense, because with the limited videos that they had to begin with, it probably looked like other people had set those there, or possibly had set them there. But it turns out that they were just curious and checking out to see what it was. That brings to mind another question, is why, if they looked in there, what did they see in there? And then why wasn't any law enforcement contacted about, hey, there's this suspicious looking device unattended in the street? Of course, there's a little bit of chaos on New Year's Eve in such a busy area, but still, I think that's why they must have thought he did not act alone. And once that was cleared up, they've backed up on that comment.
Yeah, and they are searching cell phones and 2 laptops and also a house in the area. So I'm sure we will learn more. Again, this is very fresh, just about 24 hours. So Doug Coons, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be right back. New Orleans is hosting the Sugar Bowl later today, and the biggest sports event of the year, of course, the Super Bowl, in just over a month. Joining us now is New Orleans City Council member J.P. Morel. Good morning. Thanks for being with us, and our condolences to your entire community, first of all.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today.
Well, I want to start with the nature of the attack. The police captain says the city didn't anticipate a vehicular attack, but there was a report in 2017 from the Department of Public Works warning of a similar style attack like those seen in Europe and other places around the world. So can you level that for us, square that for us?
I think that was a misstatement and truly a disconnect, because the installation of the actual bollards that go up and down along Bourbon Street, that was done in the wake of the attack in France over almost 10 years ago. So the fact that there were bollards installed on Bourbon Street was directly accounted for a vehicular attack. And now it's come to everyone's attention, as well as the council, because we weren't aware of it as well, that the bollards were not up because construction and repairs of those bollards had not been done before the Sugar Bowl and before New Year's Eve. And so, as you saw, an NOPD vehicle was placed at the corner of Canal Street and Bourbon to dissuade people from going down there. But the individual, the terrorist who made the attack, swerved onto the sidewalk and plowed through pedestrians to then get back on the road and go down Bourbon Street. The bollard situation is troubling. There's a lot of information, both inside and outside, coming on about it, and the council is going to get to the bottom of that. That's an infrastructure issue that falls within our purview, and we are going to have a very lengthy and robust, transparent investigation regarding that. Our focus the last 24 hours has really been on the victims and their families, those who are injured, those who have surviving family, making sure they're notified, making sure they're resourced. The City Council, working with our Greater New Orleans Fund, has created a similar fund to the Boston Marathon bombing, where we're trying to get resources to those victims to help them, including people at the Fly family inn. We've been focused today on making sure that security is up and running for the Sugar Bowl today, obviously, because that kickoff starts in about 4 hours, as well as assessing all the things that went wrong. I mean, obviously, there's new information today, like we found out that the terrorist was posting on social media hours before the attack. There's going to be a lot of after action report on this, all the way from the federal level down to the local level, and it's just a rough time.
Yeah, I can only imagine. You know, is there any indication from what you're hearing when you talk about those bollards? Did the Do we know if the the person who did this, did they know that those would be down and that they'd have easier access?
Well, I can tell you what we learned today was that originally there was some idea that there were multiple people involved because they found two undetonated IEDs elsewhere in the quarter. The FBI confirmed today was that those undetonated IEDs were actually placed by the same person before the attack. So that would have given the individual the time while placing those IEDs
Right.
to scope out and plan their route. Because obviously, if you watch the video where he swerved onto Bourbon Street, there was no hesitation and it was planned. The way that he went right by the truck car and then immediately cut the wheel and gunned it. So he had scoped this out and planned it, and this was a deranged, calculated terrorist act.
Yeah, absolutely. No question about that. The other thing from the press conference that we just learned that stood out in my mind is all the people looking inside those coolers. But did no one report it? No one called anything in?
Well, I think no one did report it. We don't know yet if anyone called it in. Obviously, we're going through all our video. Honestly, part of what caused the confusion for the FBI to think there were multiple people is that there were people interacting with the IEDs. And I think that's what misled the FBI. I think, well, someone's there playing with the cooler, they must have placed it. It is really disheartening to see how far we've come from see something, say something.
Yeah.
I mean, that was drilled into our heads after 9/11, after all those attacks. It's been drilled into our heads for years since then. And this was a real basic instance of see something, say something. And we were very fortunate. Both our state, federal, and local bomb technicians. My younger brother is actually a bomb tech for the New Orleans Police Department.
Oh, wow.
They were able to defuse those IEDs and safely dispose of them. But had this went off, apparently there were triggers in the vehicle for those remote IEDs. You could have simultaneously had the horrific incident on Bourbon Street with other timed IEDs going off simultaneously. So as bad as things were, they weren't as bad as they could be. And I want to also thank our NOPD police officers in that when that vehicle came to its grinding halt, 3 officers immediately engaged this terrorist and they killed him on the spot.
Yeah.
He emerged from the vehicle with automatic weapons and more IEDs in the trunk. And who knows, had those brave officers not run to danger versus away from danger, what else he could have accomplished.
Well, that's, you did mention that you've been in contact with some of the victims' families and those types of things. What are they telling you? I'm sure everybody was out just to have a good time when this senseless tragedy happened.
I mean, it's a lot of frustration, a lot of grief, obviously, a lot of anger, and all these things are absolutely understandable and predictable. I mean, this is a city. I mean, we're renowned internationally as this place of fun, food, and culture where people literally spend every day in this city celebrating in some way. We have a street called Bourbon Street, which people party on year round. When you look at both the videos this person put out there that we're aware of and the intent he had to come here and to drive terror and a stake through the heart of America, as far as putting fear and putting doubt in the strength of our democracy, this was done intentionally on this street in America for a very specific purpose to make us second guess what the United States is about. And I mean, as difficult as it is for the Sugar Bowl to go on today, as you know, the one thing we know about terrorists is they do these things to make us scared, to make us stop living our lives, hole up in our houses, and live in fear. And as our governor has said, as our mayor has said, as everyone has stated, part of us moving forward is that's the only thing you can do in the face of terrorism. As difficult as these things are, if you let them get the headline of this thing is canceled, this city's in mourning, the country is paralyzed, that is their victory. And it puts us in a very awkward and painful position at times to still have to move forward in the moment to prevent that kind of victory.
Well, I hope the Sugar Bowl goes off well today. The Super Bowl next month for you guys, Mardi Gras after that. I remember after 9/11, the NFL coming back and playing just for the reason you're saying, to get some normalcy back and to show the terrorists that we won't be stopped. So I hope everything goes great today for you guys.
Thank you.